Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn, as GMs and as players, from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're analyzing Thursday by Night, the first of a two-part Vampire the Masquerade campaign run by Taliesin Jaffe. This is a special bonus episode commissioned by Mista, who supported the channel through my Ko-fi. If you also want to support future bonus episodes of Critical Role Demystified to cover some of the Critical Role one-shots, you can support me on Patreon or through Ko-fi at $35. Even if you don't stay a Patreon member that's here for very long, just supporting me at that level once guarantees you'll be able to choose a one-shot for me to add to the schedule. I've got a few others coming in the next couple of months, but this one should be coming out in October if I'm able to get it done in time for spooky season. Also, just a heads up, this one-shot is going to contain some intense horror content. Content warnings are in the description should you need them. Now, I'm not familiar with the Vampire the Masquerade system, and this is definitely not the best way to learn about the rules of the game, because Taliesin says right at the top that this is a homebrew mix of what is now the current edition of the game, which was then being play-tested, mixed with the old-school rules he was familiar with, as well as just some of his own homebrew. He also says the rules themselves will be severely stripped down, just to make it easier for the players. So today, for a lot of reasons, I'm not really going to have anything to say about the rules of this game, and how well they're executed. We might talk about how some of Taliesin's rules inform gameplay, but I won't be able to discuss what's homebrew and not, and we definitely shouldn't assume this game is being run rules as written. However, setting aside all those caveats, there's still a lot we can talk about today. Because when you remove the discussion of the rules, what are we left with? Vibes. Because this is a terrific horror game, as well as a fantastic way to introduce new players to not just a new system, but also a new setting. Because Taliesin does a great job of removing as many barriers to entry as possible. Because we don't talk about this very often, but one thing we as RPG players struggle with when learning a new system is character creation. Not just learning the rules and figuring out how to create a character, but also how to create a character who actually fits into the game and thematically and tonally works within the world. When I first played in an ongoing Unknown Armies campaign, I made a character who was scared of all the supernatural stuff and was totally out of place. It was honestly the kind of character who might make more sense in a Call of Cthulhu game. But that wasn't at all the way everybody else built their characters. They were all fleshmansters and magical fools and characters who had some mastery of the supernatural. So my character didn't really fit into that campaign. Okay, fair enough. After some time, I swapped him out with a different character, a monster hunter. And in his backstory, I talked about how he hunted werewolves because it seemed like one of them had brutally murdered someone in his family. And then the GM told me, well, actually, werewolves aren't a thing in this game, at least not the way you think of them. And sure, Unknown Armies is an especially weird game, and that might lend itself especially well toward that sort of friction, but I've honestly seen this happen in lots of games. I've seen people make 5th level, 5th edition D&D characters who are vampire hunters, and you have to explain to the player that they're too low level to have that sort of backstory. It's not going to fit into the world. And considering that Vampire the Masquerade is an urban fantasy gothic horror game set in the modern day, in theory that should make it easy to make characters who fit into that setting. But you still have to manage players' expectations and help them make characters who will fit into the world properly. And I can imagine that can be really tough because this game has unfamiliar mechanics and complex factions, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's the stuff that you might have to keep in mind when making a character. But Taliesin makes that part super easy, because he opens the game with the players all playing themselves. They're in Burbank, California. It's pretty much now. The last thing they remember is the final Vox Machina game, which they just played the week before. The last thing they remember is going to their cars after that game and then blacking out. And now they each wake up in a coffin. Boom. Fantastic setup. I mean, I actually think you wake up in a grave is always a good setup, and someday I should tell you about the D&D game I played in, where we woke up in a mass grave. It's still maybe my favorite campaign intro I've ever been a part of. But this setup works especially well for an introductory game to a brand new system. It's got a lot in common with Liam's first one-shot, but in this case, it's handling a lot of other heavy lifting as well. Because this is how Liam introduces the mechanics to his players. They have to roll to try to break out of their coffins, so this is how they get familiar with the dice system for the game. And the coffins are also buried under some other piece of wood, so they have to break through that as well. But also, there's a rat in the coffin with each of the players, and Taliesin says that they all feel hungry, and he strongly hints that the rats smell tasty. Laura immediately eats her rat, and she feels a bit better. Marisha tries to get out of her coffin, but she rolls really badly, so Taliesin describes how the hunger consumes her. Warning here for self-harm, because this part always freaks me out, but Taliesin describes how Marisha gets so hungry she opens up one of her own veins in her wrist and drinks her own blood. At this point, Matt and Marisha both get hungry enough to eat their rats. Travis is the first to pull himself free, and he sees that they were buried underneath the Nerdist stage, but the whole place is completely trashed. He frees Laura, and they free everybody else. And everyone seems okay, except for Liam, because his skin is cracked and broken. He almost looks like his face is a plaster mask that cracked as it moved. This is the first step Taliesin took toward assigning his players their different types of vampires. I obviously have no idea what kind of vampire Liam is, and even if I did, I wouldn't reveal it here, because Liam doesn't know it yet either. And during this scene, whenever someone rolls low, Taliesin basically just has them get distracted by these tasty-looking rats. He's essentially trying to urge them to eat one. Or maybe that's just his way of capturing the cravings they'd be feeling. Maybe he doesn't have a preference either way, but he's just simulating their own hunger. And as they explore, we get our first real sense of what the tone of this game is going to be like.
So, there's no one here, and it's kind of messed up. Oh, +3. Something is wrong.
Yeah.
Including a giant sign on the wall painted in what appears to be blood that says something is wrong.
Amazing.
Does it look like familiar handwriting?
And giant
No.
Okay.
red print.
No, and to be fair, with the size of the palette, everybody looks a little bit like it's all, it's finger paint.
Does it look like it was deliberate, or like it was like part of the Thrashtopia set?
It's way too good looking to be part of the Thrashtopia set.
Setting aside all the jokes they're going to make about the other Geek and Sundry and Nerdist productions they share studio space with, the general vibe of this game is horror and very dry wit. Liam, in character, assumes the letters are fake blood, so he tastes them. It's not the fake blood he's used to for most film shoots, but whatever it is, it tastes great. They try to arm themselves with whatever they can find. There's a Power Rangers helmet here, which Matt decides to put on for no clear reason, but I'll mention it because it's going to be important later. At this point, Travis decides to hunt down his rat, and he rolls really well, so Taliesin gives him a little piece of paper. All we know at this point is that it says, Auspex Heightened Awareness. We don't know what else it says. Laura tries to sneak ahead as they go through the doors, and so she also rolls amazing, and she also gets a piece of paper. This is essentially how Taliesin is handling the process of introducing more vampire powers to these players. When someone rolls well at something, he gives them a paper to represent that same power in some way.
So, the big door, the big door for the Twitch studio.
That door over there?
I mean, yes. I mean, like, as long as you're not pointing in the game, because then you're pointing at the front. But if you're pointing at the table,
No,
yes.
she's
then that's
Laura.
the
She's
door.
not Laura. She's Laura, not Laura. But Laura.
I'm trying to find my points. Yeah, here we are.
Where are you? Did you
There's-
me?
Yeah, there's some weird sounds coming from everywhere, but there's a big, bloody sign written on the main door to the Twitch stage.
Does it say things are getting creepy?
It says,
Is it Thursday yet?
I was born in a box. How do I end? With a question mark.
Wait a minute, does that mean other people came out of coffins?
And below it is a circle that's been drawn in blood and set into 4 corners. And in one corner is a heart. In the other corner is a face. In the other corner is a glowing sun. And in the other corner is a cross with a circle.
So now they're in a new space, and they've got a spooky riddle that they need to solve before they can pass through these doors to the Twitch stage. By the way, none of that is really ever verbalized, I don't think, but that seems to be baked into the structure of this setup. If they are who they are in real life, and Taliesin put a question on the door that leads to the room they're sitting in real life, then that seems to have subconsciously, and correctly, sent the message that this is the final place they need to go, and they have to solve this riddle before they go through. But also, there are a lot of other things to discover in the rest of the building. They go looking for weapons, and they know that they have some weapons from the Warcraft movie locked up somewhere around here. They just need Marisha's key card to get them. Marisha rolls for something and gets a bad roll. It doesn't matter what, because I'm sure if I describe it, people who know the rules to this game might get a little antsy about how that's not how the rules work, so it doesn't really matter. But the point is, she rolls low, so Taliesin describes how her forehead elongates and her eyes glow, and she gets a bit twitchy and a bit feral. And even though she rolled a failure, he still gives her a piece of paper, and he says it's because that change has begun. He's playing a little bit fast and loose with why they're getting powers, but his main goal is to introduce powers to each of them. Laura also goes into the kitchen and just eats a handful of Lucky Charms. And Taliesin says they taste gross now, which is a bummer because Laura loves Lucky Charms. But it's almost like there's something else she should be eating instead. Also, as they walk past the server room window, they notice that they do have reflections. Except for Matt, because he's a different type of vampire, it seems. They also see inside the server room and they notice that the servers are made of meat now. And that's all Taliesin says. The servers are made of meat. And he only elaborates as they ask more questions, but otherwise he leaves it vague. And while sometimes there are some things you really want to be clear about and you want to offer a lot of details to your players up front, Meat Computer is one where you can leave it vague and elaborate if they ask more details. Because their mental image is already going to be pretty strong, so there's no need for you to describe the most graphic version possible. And at this point, Danny Carr emerges from the server room with a tray full of tea and a big smile on her face. She more or less ignores them and takes the tea to Sean's office. In the next room, they find a bunch of their colleagues sitting at desks and working. They've all got sunken eyes and they're terrified, but they're not running. And they're wearing signs around their neck that say, "Drink me." Danny comes back and happily answers the players' questions, but her answers are confusing. For example, when asked why she got tea from the meat computer room and brought it to Sean's office, she happily says it's for a creative meeting. As if that's a perfectly normal answer. So Liam and Marisha go to that creative meeting where their colleagues, Eric, Whitney, and Matt Key, are already there. They all have a bit of mold at the side of their mouths, and in fact, Matt Key is almost entirely made of mold, but unlike the Drink Me folks downstairs, these three are all excitedly taking notes for the upcoming project. Whatever it is. And they're being vague, partially because Taliesin is trying to preserve the mystery. But also, these three seem to think our players are in the loop, and they also don't think what's happening is very strange. And they also say, "Dad's coming back any second now. Dad has plans. Have some tea." And this really helps capture the vibe of Taliesin's approach to this one-shot, because there's a lot of very matter-of-fact horror here. Danny happily serves tea she got from a room full of meat, delivering it to some moldy friends as some frightened people wait for vampires to drink their blood. And all these people can talk about in the creative meeting is how exciting this project is going to be, because now they have more opportunities than they had before. And this is an approach to horror that I really love, because I think it can be even more frightening than having NPCs scream or beg or do obviously sinister things like sharpen knives or whatever. The way everyone in the office is behaving is deeply troubling because so many of them are treating it like just another workday, or maybe a very exciting workday, and not some sort of vampire-themed massacre. And in my experience, people acting like something horrific is perfectly natural is actually way more frightening for players than just doing scary things, because it also just makes them feel like they're going insane, even though they know they're acting rationally, reacting to the insane things around them. In the creative meeting, the players ask about Taliesin, and Taliesin the Game Master clarifies, "Oh no, you would have seen another open hole in the floor of the Nerdist set." It's not graceful, but sometimes you just have to retcon things, and I'm sure that he's just feeling the pressure and just forgot to mention it in that last scene. And the folks in this meeting say Taliesin was here, but he left. But he's not Dad. That's someone else. Now, some of the players decide to head for the door, but Matt joins them and tries to cut them off, because if he doesn't have a reflection, then it might be a bad idea for them to go out if the sun is still up, because they might be vampires. Liam pokes Matt Key to see what happens, since he seems to be made of mushrooms, and Taliesin has him roll stamina. Well, not quite.
Roll, what am I going to roll for this one? Stamina?
Stamina?
Stamina.
Stamina. Let's roll stamina. What am I going to add to that? Actually, just roll stamina. Let's see what happens.
Shite.
I think he thinks it's stamina.
I know, I can't say it right. I know. I'm just
Sorry, it's a lot of pressure behind that screen, man.
Liam also rolls persuasion, and Taliesin gives him a piece of paper. Taliesin also tells Marisha that the tea looks really good to her, so she drinks some. Back downstairs, Laura, Travis, Sam, and Matt get to the door leading outside, but there's a curtain in front of the door and a sign that says, "Your funeral." Laura and Sam want to push through, and immediately, Taliesin has Matt roll for wits. Laura and Sam try to tell Taliesin we're going through the door, but Taliesin stops them. He says hold on, so we can resolve Matt's roll first. Matt rolls well, and Taliesin says Matt feels really good about the curtain. So in character, Matt stops them and says he should go through first. He opens the curtain, and a beam of sunlight cuts him in half and turns him to ash. They panic and freak out and scoop his ashes into the Power Rangers helmet, because they don't know what else to do with them. See? I told you it'd be important. Now all the players hear some thumping sounds from upstairs, and back in the creative meeting, Marisha tries to get up. But she can't, because she drank the tea. And she finds out that the tea was made of Sean, and also now she's turning into mushrooms.
It's just something I ate. It's, mushrooms have never sat well with me.
And that's the last thing Marisha ever said.
No!
We come barging in. You guys!
I'm so sorry. He's gone. He's gone. What'd you do?
She's a mushroom.
What do you mean?
She's a mushroom. Look! And I push her into her shoulder.
She leans right over, and you've got powder on your hand.
What happened? No. What happened? We took care of the guy we were with. What'd you do?
Where's Matt?
Matt died.
Suddenly, Christian bursts into the room. He is covered in blood and says, "Can you keep it down?"
Does he smell good?
He does. You guys are making a lot of noise, and people are trying to work. God, And he goes back out.
Hey, just a side note. For their wedding, I bought a big block of tickets to Hamilton, and they can't use them now.
The wedding's done, Liam. The wedding is done.
I get that. Would you like to see Hamilton again?
Suddenly, the creative room.
Show, right?
Suddenly, the creative room stops.
And they all go
All
Hamilton.
eyes turn to Liam.
I mean, if anyone wants to buy them off me, I'll cut you a real good deal.
And they slowly start to get up.
Wait, what's going on?
Wait, what?
You have Hamilton tickets?
They get into a fight with these guys, but as soon as these attackers take a hit, they drop to the ground and start giggling. Taliesin is definitely telegraphing that this is not the same type of game as something like D&D. This is not necessarily a fight to the death scenario. Danny gives them a key card for the Twitch set and a wooden stake, and then she sits down at an unpowered laptop and starts working. Once again, that is some weird matter-of-fact horror because the players don't know what to do with it. So they decide to go to the Twitch set, and that's when they go to break. And then they say goodbye to Matt and Marisha, who are off to go meet with their wedding planner. Because as we learned later on, Matt and Marisha had a hard out, and so Taliesin was working on getting them out of the game as soon as possible. That's probably why he encouraged Marisha to drink some tea, but it is definitely why he handled the Matt situation the way he did. Laura and Sam were about to go outside despite the warning, so rather than just let them die, and rather than warning them out of game, he seized on the opportunity to kill off Matt. So he had Matt roll something, but as he did, Laura and Sam tried to tell Taliesin that they wanted to go outside while he was, figuring out what Matt's result was going to be. But Taliesin stopped them. He said, hold on, because he wanted to resolve this roll first. Because it was really important to him that Matt go through the curtain first. And so that gave him an opportunity to give Matt a really good feeling about this curtain. And I think Matt probably knew what was up. He knew Taliesin was telling him, hey man, I've got you. I know what I'm doing. You should open the curtain. So Matt did so, and he was immediately vaporized. Which is probably what both Matt and Taliesin wanted. Well, I don't think Matt specifically wanted his fictional alter ego to die necessarily, but he wanted to be excused from the table as early as was reasonable, and that's what Taliesin delivered. After the break, the players look around the building some more. Travis finds a replica elf knife, and Liam uses his special powers of magical vampire convincingness to convince Travis to protect him, essentially to keep him alive as long as possible. Taliesin just comes up with a homebrew rule to handle that at the table since it's a special circumstance. I guess that's not typically how it works. And he succeeds, so Travis agrees to protect him. Now, the players know the drawings on the Twitch doors are some sort of puzzle, so they start making a list of all the writing they've seen to figure out if maybe this is a word jumble.
Make an intelligence test.
Who? All of us?
No, just Sam.
Okay.
2 successes.
Okay, you know me. I've been busy all week. This is not a word scramble. I didn't have time for that shit.
I would high five you right now.
Thank you.
I honestly kind of love this, because I don't think there's anything wrong with telling your players, hey, I love where your head's at, but you are absolutely barking up the wrong tree. The downside of it is that, in theory, it does essentially pull your players out of the game by admitting the artifice of it. But on the other hand, this simple tactic also just keeps them from going down a certain rabbit hole. Now, I know Matt Mercer hardly ever does this in the main campaign, and I honestly respect that decision. But on the other hand, there's a certain moment from Campaign 2 that might be entertaining for us as an audience, but was very frustrating for Matt to watch his players hyper-focus on something that ultimately didn't matter. And honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with just breaking kayfabe every once in a while to let your players know that they're going down the wrong track. Because this helps Taliesin's players figure out the right answer to the puzzle. They put the stake down next to the drawing of the heart, and there's a low, bassy thud sound, and the drawing of the heart turns black and boils. So clearly something's happening. They put the helmet full of ashes on the icon of the sun, and they get the same response, so they are on the right track. So they go looking for clues and weapons, and they basically split up. Laura finds a rat and eats it, but while eating rats has helped her get rid of some of her hunger dice, eating one last rat does not get rid of her last hunger die, which is Taliesin's way of basically letting her know that she can't keep eating rats to do the vampire equivalent of farming for XP. She's going to need something more substantial. Meanwhile, Liam goes and drinks some blood from one of the Drink Me folks. Just no questions asked, just I'm gonna drink some human's blood. They gather up some prop wooden stakes, some pencils, and their Warcraft weapons. Travis finds a few women huddled in a room, and he's able to sense that they're still human, and they've killed someone in the past 24 hours, presumably in self-defense. I think one of them is actually Amy Dolan. Travis and Laura consider eating these two, but they decide to leave them alone. Laura wanders down a dark hallway and finds a room where the floor is just an empty void. Ivan Van Norman is playing cards with Amy Vorpal, Damien Portier, and Sam, not Sam Riegel, so I believe this is Sam DeLeve. I don't actually know how it's pronounced, I've only seen it written. Ivan's hair is standing up, like he got electrocuted. As Laura watches, Sam pulls a card, and then a huge spider scurries in and drags them away. A new chair floats in to replace Sam's place. And Ivan doesn't seem to think any of this is all that strange. Amy pulls a card and her body rotates in pieces like she's made of glass or like she's a Rubik's Cube, and then she shatters into glass shards. Laura drinks a lot of Damien's blood, and she leaves him alive, but he still falls to the floor. But since it's just a dark abyss, he just falls into nothingness. Ivan invites Laura to play. She sits down and pulls a card, and it's the Two of Swords. And apparently that's 2 bleeds, so she bleeds from 2 fingers and gets 2 more hunger dice due to her blood loss. But the swords represent knowledge, so Ivan will answer a question. Laura asks about the part of the puzzle with the drawing of the head, and Ivan says that the head represents knowledge of what's happened to them. Sure, they know they're vampires, but they need to put something down that represents what they know about that. He says he might be able to help them know what to put down, but that's another question. AKA, that's another card. And this is such a fantastic temptation. The players have been feeling pretty adrift trying to find the clues for the riddle, so they now have a way that they can definitely get more information, but there's also a potential for a huge downside. And without getting into spoilers, the cast has recently had some really bad experiences with cards in the final days of the Vox Machina campaign, so they're a little gun-shy. But Laura actually can't leave. Ivan needs another player to take her place. The others arrive, and they send Sam to go find another player to replace Laura. Sam mentions that he's running, and so Taliesin gives him a vampire power, celerity, and now he can go really fast. He retrieves Max and replaces Laura at the table with Max. Max draws a card, and he seems to get healthier and more clear-headed. He's not in that same petrified daze. Now he can actually answer questions. He tells the players that it's been at least a week since the last game, and he mentions that there's something else upstairs. Something that's not a wolf. Again, this is a fantastic choice from Taliesin. I think he actually did pull a random card, so I'm not sure if this is something that he had ready for this specific card, or if he just interpreted something that he drew, but either way, 2 great things happen here. 1, Max can give them a little bit more information. Not enough to give away anything too major, but just enough to make them feel like they're making progress. And 2, by showing that Max actually healed, he's demonstrating that not all of these cards are bad. And that kind of helps encourage them to maybe pull again. The others convince Sam to sit down and play the game. He pulls a card and immediately his hunger gets maxed out. That was not a good card. And Taliesin describes how Sam just moves in a blur, and then he's fine. And Max is pale. And dead. And in most games, I wouldn't be wild about a GM taking away that much agency from a player, to the point where now the player has killed someone they might not have wanted to. But Taliesin is trying to get his players comfortable with the fact that they might have to kill to survive. He's trying to demonstrate that they've now developed needs and instincts that are so strong, they could kill without even trying. Essentially, he's saying, you're monsters now. So in order to sell that concept, he takes the wheel from the player for a minute. It also helps that this group has an enormous amount of trust with each other. This probably isn't something you could get away with if you didn't have that same level of trust. Anyway, Laura freaks out and stabs Ivan, pinning him to the chair. He's not angry, but he's still mad, if that makes any sense. And the same goes for the death of Max. He definitely doesn't react like someone who's frightened or feels his life is in danger or is in the room with a murderer, but more like Laura just flipped the Monopoly board. He's upset, but he's still keeping his composure because someone here has to be the rational person. Once again, you've got that surreal detachment from the more horrible stuff that's happening. But he still gives Sam his question that he earned by pulling a card. They ask about the part of the puzzle with the cross in it, and he confirms they just need a sign of faith there. Laura pulls her dagger free from Ivan, with a little bit of an apology. There's a bit of a spark of electricity as the blade leaves his body, and a few spiders crawl out of the wound. Boy, as someone who doesn't know anything about this game, I truly have no clue what's up with him. Is he a Frankenstein monster? Is that a thing? Animated by lightning, but full of bugs because he's dead? Anyway, the players leave because technically Max is still seated, so Ivan still has a player. Loophole. They find a cross, and Travis puts his shirt around it to pick it up without touching it, and Laura finds a leather book with a fanged silver skull on the cover. It's called The Telling of the Book of Nod. She tries to read it, fails the roll, gets even more hungry. Taliesin hints that there are more sounds upstairs, scuttling sounds, and that could be something to eat, since you need something to eat since you have so much hunger, Laura. Now, they already know that there's danger up there, but Laura is still genuinely considering going up there anyway to go drink something. Before they do, they put the cross on the puzzle, and once again, the blood bubbles.
Should we use the book on the other one?
I think that's probably.
Or I could, I could like bust out one of my fangs.
Oh, music. Don't you?
Where are you?
Don't you need that to eat more disgusting rats with?
Were you judging me now?
Yeah, the whole time.
Have you not had any rats yet?
Nope.
You've had a rat.
Have you?
No, of course not.
I ate a man.
They put the book down on the puzzle and they hear the door unlock. But before they go through, they agree they need a snack to get their strength up, so Laura and Sam go upstairs. They see 2 survivors who work for a different corner of Legendary. Apparently they work for Amy Poehler, and our heroes don't know them. So they pretend they're just fellow survivors, and they're not here to eat them. They close in, they make small talk, and Laura bites into one of them and drinks some blood. Now Taliesin asks how much blood she's drinking, and Laura is torn. Obviously from a gameplay perspective, she wants to get rid of her hunger. But thinking about what her character would want and what she'd be comfortable with after such a short amount of time, she doesn't want to kill anyone. So Taliesin simplifies this by having Laura leave it to the dice. He has her roll a d10, presumably to determine how much control she has in this moment. And since Taliesin has foreshadowed the fact that these vampires might lose control and become ravenous, the party accepts this. Yeah, it's reasonable to leave this to the dice. She rolls a 3, and she drains all the girl's blood and kills her. Sam drags the other survivor downstairs so Liam can feed on him, but due to a poor roll, Liam isn't able to feed on him. Now, Taliesin doesn't really describe why he's not able to do so, and part of me wishes he would, just so I could understand what went wrong here. Like, does the victim fight him off? Does Liam just not latch on correctly? Can you tell that I have a little baby at home? That's kind of a glaring lack of information. But on the other hand, this is a real person Taliesin knows. And so maybe Taliesin doesn't want to narrate the gruesome details of a real person struggling to fight off their attacker, and that's completely fair. But also, this just might be part of Taliesin's style. Like I discussed earlier, he doesn't really go into graphic detail when narrating the unpleasant and gruesome details of the session. And whether that's because he's just not sure how much his players can handle, or because he's trying to be respectful of the audience who didn't necessarily know what this game had in store for them when they started watching, or because these NPCs are real people, or because Taliesin's a bit rusty or intimidated, or just because this is his style, it doesn't matter why. Because I'm never going to insist that anybody should narrate any level of violence in a game with more detail than they're willing to. If you don't like graphic descriptions of violence, or you're not comfortable doing them for a certain session, you don't have to do them, and you shouldn't feel like you do. Anyway, they hear some growling, and a pack of 10-foot-tall wolves approach the party. One of them has awesome tattoos going up its arm, and another has shaved hair on the sides of its head. So these are people they know, Rachel and Ed. And I've been talking about how there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and how I don't know much about the lore of the World of Darkness, but I know what those are. Those are werewolves. I know that one. I'm pretty sure those are werewolves. The party runs to the Twitch stage, and Travis falls behind, but thankfully, Taliesin is rolling really low, so Travis is able to catch up with the party. Before he reaches them, Liam uses his magical convincing powers to convince Laura to keep him safe. He's just trying to make that deal with everybody. And Laura seems surprised. Sorry, Laura the player, not Laura the in-game character. Laura's surprised that Liam would willingly use this power when it could get him more hunger dice if he fails the roll. But Liam clarifies, no, I get more hunger dice just by using the power. And I think that's just very interesting to watch two players have very different reactions to these game mechanics. Laura, in this instance, seems to be far more risk-averse. She doesn't want to make a move that might present her with more red dice. However, Liam is exploring the system and testing the limits of what he can get away with depending on how the dice treat him. And he's fully aware that this might bite him in the ass. Pun intended? But it's a game, and so he's okay with the consequence if that's what happens. Now, neither of them are wrong here. This is just the process of learning a new system. You get to see how it actually feels to play and whether that experience is something you want to continue with in future sessions. And this doesn't even mean that Laura would automatically say no to a long-term Vampire the Masquerade campaign, because sometimes players just need a little bit of time to get used to the fact that this game works very differently from the one they're used to, especially if you're like the cast of Critical Role and you've really only played 1 or 2 games. That's why I do feel like it's a good idea to invite players to just play 1 or 2 sessions of a new game system before asking them to commit to a long-term campaign, so they can sink their teeth into the mechanics. That time I definitely intended the pun, and make sure this is something they're actually going to enjoy playing long-term. Anyway, once Travis is back with the other players, they enter the Twitch stage. Laura goes to get her dice bag, and she finds a bomb in the cabinet. So she still takes her dice bag, which is very funny to me. There's another message on the outside of the Critical Role set, painted in blood. Life needs things to live. And someone is sitting at the head of the table where Taliesin is sitting in real life. But it's not Taliesin. It's an older man, a heavyset, gray-haired vampire. And it's Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons & Dragons. And he's excited to meet them, and he explains that he's in charge of everything that's happened here. He set up the puzzle for them, and he arranged this whole takeover. Laura spots a tunnel underneath the Wednesday Club table. That's how Gary and the other vampires come and go whenever the sun is up. Gary's excited to play with the whole group, but when he finds out that Matt and Marisha are dead, he's pissed. He went through the trouble of turning them into vampires and building an underground studio for them to play their games forever, and now Matt is dead? Now Sam offers to DM. After all, the cast has all been taking turns DMing. Sam just ran his first one-shot semi-recently. But Gary snaps that Sam's one-shot was mostly just math and the talent of his players. They carried Sam's ass.
Hey, wait! You're a dungeon master?
It's like the dungeon master.
You could lead the game, right?
This is nothing personal, Sam. I just really wanted to play with Matt.
Don't dodge my kitty gaggers!
Now, one of the things that Gary mentions during his rant is that the Critical Role cast ended things. He seems upset that the cast finished the Vox Machina campaign, and I'm sure he represents some corner of the fandom that was worried about the future of Critical Role post-Vox Machina, and probably also reflected the anxiety of the cast after this campaign had had a satisfying ending, and now they were wondering how they were going to run another campaign and try to capture the magic of that first one, and how they'd even handle some of those logistics. And so Gary says that they put in a lot of effort to make sure the cast can just keep doing this. So Gary doesn't just represent the anxieties of some of Critical Role's most boisterous fans, which would still be an appropriate role considering some of the stuff that Gary said once the internet became a thing in the early 2000s. He didn't necessarily believe the coolest thing about female D&D players later in his life, so it is kind of fitting for him to take on the role of a toxic fan. But broadening our focus out from just Gary Gygax and his singular role in this game session, the entire session reflects the cast's concerns about where they're going next. And of course, this is the potential power of a vampire story. The incredible ability for it to represent things through allegory. I've talked before about how Strahd is my favorite D&D villain because of the incredible allegorical potential he has, where a Curse of Strahd campaign can essentially offer a cathartic venue to fight misogynists and abusers. And that's because I think the concept of a vampire is really useful for telling stories about predators and cruelty. But the vampire is also a flexible metaphor, and that's not the only thing you can do with it, because it can also represent anxieties around aging and around your legacy. And so with this cast just having wrapped up its first campaign and trying to figure out what's next for them, and possibly in the early stages of planning their exit from Geek and Sundry, depending on when those conversations actually began, but these are all things that would have been on the players' minds. And so here, the villain just throws these ideas in their faces. I want you to keep playing the same game forever. I was so upset that you ended the Vox Machina campaign that I turned you all into vampires and built you a studio so you could just keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's a really cool layer added to this session. And talk about someone flipping the game board over when they don't get their way, Gary arms the bomb. It's going to go off in 60 seconds. And so before they die, he asks them to sign the miniature of the big bad they fought at the end of the Vox Machina campaign. You know, before the cast members are incinerated. And as the players stall, Gary gets threatening and scary and prepares to attack them. And then Vampire Matt Colville rushes in and tackles Gary, urging the cast to run. There's no explanation for Vampire Matt Colville, by the way. That's just a thing that happened, I guess. They dive into the tunnel and Geek and Sundry explodes behind them. And they're going to pick that up next time. And then at the end of that game, as they're just decompressing, they talk about how they're going to play a second Vampire the Masquerade game next week and potentially start getting into some of the more lore and game mechanics now that they're essentially through the tutorial. That's not how Taliesin phrases it, but that is essentially what just happened. Taliesin also wonders if the audience figured out which vampire clans he was nudging the cast members towards, or if they all recognized the monsters and the magic and the mayhem he was hinting at. He also clarifies that he asked permission from all the people he killed off during the game, and that's a really nice thing to do, considering this game is being broadcast for such a wide audience, and that might not be what everyone wants. So that's a nice gesture from Taliesin toward their friends and colleagues. And, I don't know if there's a lesson there necessarily. I don't think most of us are broadcasting our games, but I just think it's neat. Thanks so much for watching. This might be this week's Critical Role Demystified episode, or you might get another one later in the week. I'm not being coy, I genuinely don't know. This week has been crazy. I spent all of Monday running around trying to find a replacement car battery. It all worked out, but man, I've got so many videos that I want to make, but I'm just one guy. It's a miracle I'm getting anything done this week at all. But I have some big hopes for the rest of this week. We'll see if they play out. But the best way to find out if I can get everything filmed that I want to and get it all edited is to make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you get all of my bonus videos. You can also support me financially on Patreon to get my videos ad-free and to get other cool perks. Don't forget to come check out my Discord server and sign up for my newsletter to get all of my updates. And just a reminder, the US election is happening right now. Make sure to vote. And hey, remember how Donald Trump said he wanted to repeal the Affordable Care Act? He whined about it all throughout his first campaign in 2016. Then he got elected and he tried to repeal it for 4 years straight. Then he spent another 4 years trying to be president again, and just a couple months ago, he still says he doesn't know what he'd replace it with, but he has concepts of a plan. Why are we considering making this guy in charge of a country? If you worked at a job and you talked about a big project you wanted to do and you talked about it for 9 years, and then finally somebody asked you how it's going and you said you had concepts of a plan, you'd be carrying your stuff out of the office in a cardboard box by the end of the week. We should expect better from someone who wants to be the leader of the free world, and it's insane this is considered controversial in any way. Anyway, vote. Please vote. And then after you vote, watch this video here. This was a Q&A video I did. There's some fun stuff there, so make sure to check it out. Until next time, play fair and have fun. I didn't need to breathe because I'm a vampire. Happy Halloween. I don't really like Halloween, but it's fun to make videos that are Halloween themed. I like Christmas and my birthday.